Europe is under pressure. More than 600,000 people have already streamed into the European Union this year, and more arrive every day. Seeking refuge, a new life or job, fleeing war, poverty and persecution. The people smuggling trade is booming, with people paying thousands of dollars to reach a new life, willing to take incredible risks to get there, through a dangerous sea crossing at night or crammed into the back of a van. The influx is putting huge pressure on the European Union. The club binds together 28 countries economically, but also with common values of peace, democracy and the rule of law. And it's now being tested like never before. Already Europe's been under huge strain, with the debt crisis and Greece's ailing economy, Moscow's increasing influence in the east, and in the west, the spectre of a country, the UK, voting to leave. But it is the refugee crisis that is now exposing deep splits between EU countries.
I fear we are starting to rebuild invisible new iron curtains across Europe.
I am convinced that if we do not go further, we will not only stop moving, but we will go backwards, and it will be the end of the European project.
Du projet européen.
I'm Duncan Crawford, and I'm travelling from the fringes of Europe all the way to its heart to try and answer the question, could we be facing the end of the European Union as we know it? My journey begins outside the EU, in Serbia, in Belgrade. We're trying to find out how people feel about the EU now, because after the huge demands of the refugee crisis, this Union of European countries looks increasingly divided. Serbia's politicians want the country to become part of the European Union. Serbia's already been in a political union before. For most of the 20th century, it was part of Yugoslavia. And the landscape still bears the scars of its breakup. The Socialist Federal Republic of Yugoslavia was formed after the Second World War, but an economic and political crisis in the 1980s led to the rise of nationalism and war.
Many Serbs will tell you how wealthy the country used to be in comparison to its neighbours, such as Bulgaria and Romania in particular, because Yugoslavia was the most liberal, forward-looking and one of the wealthiest of the states in Central and Eastern Europe.
But Yugoslavia collapsed in the early 1990s. That led to half a decade of conflict and economic devastation.
Serbs of all backgrounds feel bruised by the experience, economically, politically, psychologically, socially. The scars are very, very much there and will take a long time to heal.
Today, Belgrade is littered with abandoned factories, reminders of Yugoslavia's industrial past. In the shadow of these buildings, public parts have been turned into campsites as refugees from Syria, Iraq and Afghanistan try to work out how to get into the EU and the passport-free travel zone known as Schengen.
So let me tell you my story. It has been 3 months that I left Afghanistan, and I never faced this kind of difficult situation in my life.
Men like Hanifullah are what's causing such huge divisions in Europe.
I was in the trunk with the 4 guys from Shiraz to Tehran. 4 guys in a car trunk. Can you believe this? Do you believe this? 4 guys in a car trunk for 12 hours journey.
He's made it to Serbia, where tens of thousands are given support, but almost all want to move on.
For the future, when I reach Germany, then I will have a good time. I'll be very happy. But now I just pray that may Allah get me out of this place and to get me to my destination, Germany. When I get there, I will pass my life and I will have a good time in Germany, inshallah.
Aid agencies told me they used to see up to 8,000 refugees a day arrive here. But the flow has somewhat eased. We're on this train to Hungary because there's been flashpoints along the border with migrants and refugees, and the Hungarian government have built this huge fence there to try to stop them from entering the EU. This is the end of the line, the EU's southern border with Serbia. This mesh of metal and razor wire stretches 175 kilometres. It costs more than $100 million. That's 3 times the amount Hungary spends on dealing with asylum seekers each year. This is Hungary's border with Serbia, but it is also the EU's border. And this fence has come to symbolise the divisions between EU leaders and their response to the refugee crisis. In September, the Hungarian authorities fired tear gas and water cannon at refugees trying to cross from Serbia. The Hungarian government was condemned by the UN, and Serbia's Prime Minister accused Hungary of brutal and non-European behaviour. The fields leading up to the border are still littered with remnants from the thousands of people who tried to stream across. I have a European passport and a car, so crossing into the European Union isn't a problem. I'm travelling to Romania, one of the newer members of the EU and one of its poorest. I want to see how the people here feel about the EU now. A quarter of Romania's population are farmers. Although farming accounts for just a fraction of Europe's economy, the EU spends almost a third of its budget on subsidising agriculture. And it's not just the farmers who've gained from EU subsidies. Romania has benefited hugely from EU structural funds, and that money has been used to pay for all sorts of projects, from brand new roads to giant landfills like this. Romania, like other poorer members of the EU, have gained hugely from economic investment, but still huge numbers of its younger population see their future elsewhere.
I would want, after I finish the school, to go in London and go to university.
And fears of mass migration from the EU's poorest countries is another cause for tension. In the UK, newspaper headlines warn that immigration is out of control. Freedom of movement, a core principle of the EU, allows citizens to travel and work in any country they choose.
Left wing scum! Off the streets!
It's angered many in Britain.
British people don't want immigration. We're a small overcrowded island. We haven't got enough space and resources for our own people, let alone a torrent of mass immigration into this country.
Only by divorcing ourselves amicably from political union with Europe can this country get back its democracy, its birthright and its self-respect.
Concern over immigration has helped boost support for those who want Britain to leave the EU, and that could be about to happen. The British government's promised to hold a referendum on EU membership by the end of 2017. The European Union is in danger of losing one of its most important members.
This is not about turning our backs on Europe, quite the opposite. This is about how we make the case for a more competitive, a more open, a more flexible Europe, and how we secure the UK's place within it.
I think to Germany in particular, Britain leaving the EU is a nightmare scenario.
The EU would be losing a large net contributor to the EU budget. The EU, most importantly, would be losing a strong voice in favour of free trade.
It's time to move on to one of Europe's great capital cities and the seat of a government that's been mired in controversy. Although Hungary's decision to build a fence was widely criticised, it's clearly had a big impact in Budapest. A few weeks ago, the central train station was packed with refugees. Now they're nowhere to be found.
Holy Spirit, you are welcome here. Among these faces
European Christians are back at the station. Hungary's Prime Minister is Viktor Orban. He made a pledge to stop refugees from coming here, and at least in Budapest, it seems to have worked. Viktor Orban says he's a reformer, doing the best he can for his country, but his critics have said he's repeatedly defied EU values and practices. What's been happening in Hungary has exposed the deep splits between different member states. And at times, those splits have disintegrated into a slanging match. International criticism of Hungary has led some here to question the future of the EU itself.
The way it is being run right now, it doesn't work. It doesn't work with the economies, if we look at Greece, for example, and it doesn't work with the migrant situation. We either stick together and help each other out, all countries, and equally, or we just let the whole thing go.
Completely divided, everyone is blaming each other, and the EU should be about holding together, everyone and solving the problems together, and this is not happening at the moment.
I've arranged a meeting with the Prime Minister's spokesperson, Zoltán Kovács, to talk about the state of Europe.
Critics would say it's against European values to help people in their time of need. You've built the fence along the border with Serbia. You've spent over $100 million on that fence.
That fence is not against European values, it is defending European values. That's the only way and means at the moment, at the hand of any government actually, to defend values if we don't stop the influx of people.
But it hasn't stopped the influx, has it? I mean, effectively, it's a lot of money which hasn't achieved what it was set out to do.
It hasn't stopped because at the border with Croatia, we haven't finished construction works yet. And obviously, we are not going to introduce the very same regime as we have introduced at the border with Serbia, up until we are not ready to introduce that. Actually, that the fence is not ready, and obviously the police and military forces at the border are not ready to patrol the legal crossing points to the country. Again, what we are trying to establish is not sealing our borders, sealing the green borders, that is the natural borders of the country, leaving open all the legal crossing points and provide the possibility for everyone who would like to come to Europe as a refugee, as a migrant, to come the legal way. And that's the only solution. If Europe is not reestablishing that, then we are in a great trouble, because that's a completely unregulated, uncontrolled procedure, and it's obviously cannot be the right of anybody who is arriving to Europe to misuse, abuse the European system.
But in terms of the amount of money which has been spent, you've effectively sealed off the border with Serbia, you're extending into Croatia, you're still seeing tens of thousands of migrants, refugees enter your country. Where will it end? Will you seal off the border with Romania as well? And if that's not effective, where does it end again? Are you just going to surround your whole country in barbed wire?
When you're defending Europe, when you're defending your own freedoms, money is not the question.
But how are refugees affecting your freedoms?
We are talking about illegal migrants. We don't know if they are refugees. It's going to turn out, according to the statistics, that less than half, so the majority of them, are not going to be entitled for refugee status. That's a fundamental issue here. You have to address a problem which is arising from the very fact that hundreds of thousands of people are coming to Europe without any kind of discipline, without identification.
Do you blame Angela Merkel then? Because she said Syrians are welcome. Do you blame Germany for what's happened?
No, we don't blame anybody, because well, it's not our task and duty to blame anybody's internal politics and decisions. We blame the consequences of those decisions. And the consequences are that people keep on coming in very great numbers. Tens of thousands, rather hundreds of thousands of people are still on the route towards Europe.
EU rules are decided in Brussels, but as the biggest economy in Europe, Germany has frequently played the role of leader and enforcer of those rules. During the financial crisis, it led the way in making countries sign up to strict debt and deficit rules, and it's now tried to take moral leadership over the refugee crisis by welcoming Syrians to the country.
Daraus leiten sich unsere Gesetze ab. Those who have to flee in terror from war and have reasons to be protected, those shall be welcomed here, and we stand by that.
Willkommen sein, und dazu stehen wir.
We're now heading towards Germany, but first we stop in Slovakia to see how the refugee crisis is impacting there. This is a refugee camp in Slovakia where Syrian refugees have been arriving. They've been sent here from Austria. The Austrian authorities say they've been so overwhelmed by refugees that they've had to move some of them out of the country. Like this 20-year-old man from Homs, he didn't want to show his face.
Here people don't like us. I was walking in this street, people talk to me, but I don't want to be here.
Hundreds of Syrians have been forced to move here temporarily while their asylum claims are processed, and some of them aren't happy about that. But that's not the main reason why this outsourcing of refugees has been so controversial. It's because local Slovakians who live near here are angry it's been allowed to happen. Over the summer, the village held a vote on the issue of asylum seekers. 97% voted against allowing refugees to stay. In a local bar, people feel powerless. Local opinion doesn't matter, this man tells me. We had a vote here, but the Slovakian government decided the refugees could come anyway. An EU deal for a quota system to distribute 120,000 refugees across Europe has also caused anger. Slovakia and 3 other countries voted against the plan, but it's still going ahead.
This is a politically toxic issue because it implies that member states will give up sovereignty in such a sensitive area, such as migration and asylum policy. And secondly, this is not the solution to the problem. It's at best a short-term fix to face the emergency, but it doesn't address the fundamental problem. How do we reduce the number of people risking their lives to cross the Mediterranean and try to reach Europe?
We leave behind Slovakia and travel towards the Austrian border. We're heading to Vienna, one of the most prosperous cities in Europe and regarded by many as the world capital for classical music.
Throughout the financial crisis in Europe, Austria has been one of the northern European countries who've been playing hardball basically with countries like Greece saying no, you've got to stick to EU rules on finance and regulation.
Greece has been pushed to the edge with huge debts and high unemployment. Compare that to Vienna, lots of jobs and steady economic growth. But even here, anti-EU sentiment is rising. At this recent election rally of Austria's far-right Freedom Party, its leader said the EU was too powerful and demanded Brussels gives powers back to national governments. Pianist Gert Hescher has spent his life studying the differences between European countries through the music they make.
Bechstein from Berlin, 1869, pretty smooth, very rich in tone.
So this is rich in tone. What's the tone of a Viennese piano?
Sweet and singing.
We're going to hear sweet and singing.
This is a typical Viennese piano.
That sounded quite sweet and singing to me.
To me it is, and to many connoisseurs.
So this one
is a French piano. It's completely different because it's very percussive, a little bit rough. You see, it's more brilliant,
Nothing sweet about the French piano.
Nothing sweet, but very elegant, very clear.
Are there any parallels between the differences of pianos, between the French piano, the Austrian piano, the German piano, and differences between the countries themselves?
I guess so. For example, Ignaz Paderewski said about the Era piano that the piano would represent the French character, elegance and clearness. And the Austrian pianos always have a little melancholy.
Melancholy, but also happiness. For most his adult life, Ludwig van Beethoven adopted Vienna as his home city. It is here where he composed the Ninth Symphony, later to become the EU's official anthem, Ode to Joy. It's said to express the European ideals of freedom, peace and solidarity. Ideals that seem to be lacking of late. In Germany, neo-Nazis clash with police after Angela Merkel's pledge to take in Syrian refugees. This violence broke out at a shelter for migrants in August. But despite isolated outbreaks of violence, hope and belief in the values of the EU still run strong here. At the Berlin Wall, everywhere you look, there are reminders of Europe's divided past, reminders that refuse to be forgotten.
This is part of what remains of the wall. Most of it has come down, but it doesn't matter. The symbolism of this place is strikingly powerful. These leftover walls, they're a permanent reminder, a history lesson set in stone of the divisions which once split this country and Europe in two. It's been 25 years since East and West Germany came together again as one country, and every year Germans celebrate reunification. Here, perhaps more than anywhere, people are strong supporters of the European project.
I think this is typically human. You only look at the difficulties, at the problems, but we have a lot of benefits from the EU, especially looking at the open borders, economically wise.
But others disagree, even within German Chancellor Angela Merkel's own political party, the Christian Democrats.
So you think a dream of a United States of Europe, that's effectively coming to an end?
I never dreamt this dream because we don't have a European population, we have peoples in Europe. They are talking in their own languages, they have their own habits, cultures, and this is really an asset of Europe, that we are different but have a common value framework, and this is what we should keep up.
Some say the EU was forged and shaped in response to times of crisis. But could this crisis, this flow of people arriving at its borders, be its undoing? I've travelled through 6 countries talking to people about what the EU means to them, and everyone I met has had their lives shaped by this union in different ways. But perhaps that's the point.
Europe has always been a melting pot of different cultures, of different languages and ideas and different visions. For a long time, the EU has pushed towards more integration and greater unity. It's no surprise from travelling around Europe that there's a huge variety of opinions. It's to be expected about this union of 28 different member states and its future. But it's clear that the refugee crisis is causing great concern for many,
and how the EU responds to the crisis is already defining its future.